I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and this is the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. I'm taking the taboos of menopause and perimenopause and bringing light to the dark. No bullshit, no shame. It's time for us to gain a new paradigm in female health, out with the old and in with the new, and I'm bringing fresh perspectives from someone in the arena. I've been practicing women's health for nearly 20 years, and I'm spilling the tea on what it means to live at midlife, knowing that the best is yet to come. I'm sharing my Gen X approach to living through this transition. Sassy, a bit sweary, and always honest. Tactical tips and instantly usable information is my aim. I hope to make you laugh and that you learn something new that helps you embrace the change. Together, we bring power to the peri. Onward to the podcast. Hello, listeners. This is Dr. Fiona Lovely and the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. And today's conversation, as I love to bring you these deep, useful conversations, showing us that in menopause, we get an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. Not just choose better for our health, but choose better for a lot of things in our lives. And today's conversation is just one of those that has stayed with me since I had it a few months back. And I just can't wait for you to listen in as my dear friend, Dr. Shana Johnston, and I have a conversation about menopause. Now, Shana is a family physician and she works in maternity medicine for almost 30 years. And she experienced physician burnout at her own perimenopause. And it's an interesting and common conversation because so many of us in our perimenopause transition kept it together during the pandemic, but just barely, and then fell apart afterwards. And I would say that never is that story more relevant than when we're talking about the healthcare providers that kept the system going, the doctors and nurses in community medicine, in the hospitals that kept us moving forward to the best of their ability and knowledge at the time. And Shana speaks openly about the wheels coming off for her and having the complete burnout and leaving her practice and the heartbreak of walking away from something she loved so much. Now, she has returned to some clinical practice, but she brings this beautiful level of expertise and soul-centeredness to small women's groups for coaching around the menopause transition. And you can find out more about that at her website, which I will share in the show notes, but it's drshanajohnston.com. And, really just hear the soul, the heart in this conversation. And I knew it was going to be a great conversation when Shana said to me, I've always been really good at life's airport, departures and arrivals. She's got quite a story to tell. But let me introduce her formally. Dr. Shana Johnston is a family physician with over 25 years experience as a medical doctor. She's practiced in a wide variety of settings, from rural and remote towns to large urban centers, from small emergency departments to large urban hospitals, and from delivering babies to providing end-of-life care. She has extensive experience supporting people through the many joys and challenges that life has to offer. She has always been fascinated by the ways we can support people with health and healing that are, quote, outside the box of Western medicine, end quote, and does her best to bring a more holistic view of health and healing to her work in Western medicine. 4 years ago, after years of trying to keep up with the time pressures and stress of working in a volume-based system, Shana realized she was suffering from burnout and made the difficult decision to leave her family and maternity practice. She's been on a journey of health and healing ever since. Along with some clinical work, she created her first program, a women's group called Connecting in Community, where she brought women together to explore some of the tools she was using on her own healing journey. She's gone on to create other courses, including a contemporary course called Menopause. Let's talk about it. This will be a small group, intimate experience, a place for honest conversation, sharing wisdom, and learning from each other to help navigate this challenging transition. More details available on her website, which I will leave in the show notes for you. So this was such a great conversation for me. Shana is a good friend, as I've said, and she and I have these really deep conversations on a fairly regular basis, but pulling the curtain back and allowing you to see the vulnerability of someone who's worked in the system that can be soul crushing, and the experience of that, I think, was such a powerful discussion. And I hope you find it to be true as well. So before we get on with the show and the conversation between Dr. Shana Johnston and myself, please take a moment to listen to our great sponsors. It's important to me that the supplements I use are of the highest quality, and that's why for more than 3 years, I've been drinking AG1. It is researched and developed by an in-house team of scientists, doctors, and nutritionists with decades of experience in their respective fields. Quality for AG1 isn't just a buzzword. It's a commitment backed by expert-led scientific research, high-quality ingredients, and rigorous testing. I know I can trust what's in every scoop of AG1 because they obsess over product quality, the standards of manufacturing partners, and sustainable practices. It's easy and fast to use. Drinking AG1 mixed with water in 1 scoop a day covers my nutritional bases. Prebiotics, probiotics, digestive enzymes for gut support, B vitamins and rhodiola for energy support, folate, magnesium, and ashwagandha for stress support, and vitamin C and zinc for my immune health. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D plus K2 and 5 free travel packs with your first subscription at drinkag1.com/Fiona Lovely. That's drinkag1.com/Fiona Lovely. This is the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast, and I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and I'm thrilled to be with my friend, Dr. Shana Johnston today, family physician and goddess. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you, Fiona. You know how much I love you.
Thank you. Thank you. The feeling is so mutual. This is so fun for me to actually bring on a friend on the show and have hopefully a robust conversation about menopause.
Yes,
Yeah, it's time, isn't it?
it totally is.
Well, God knows you and I have these conversations all the time.
We do.
So now what we're doing is we're just letting my community in. We're just opening the door a little bit and saying, step into the room while we have these chats. So you have said so many interesting things to me in the time that we've known each other, but probably my favorite thing you said to me, I'm going to quote you here. You said, I have always been really good at life's airport, departures and arrivals. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. So yeah, like you said, I'm a family doctor, and I found like one of the things that I think I've always gravitated the most to is the sacred spaces in medicine. I think I've always really gravitated to the healing, the depth, like the places where the veil is a little thinner and we're much more in touch with our humanity. And for me, that's arrivals and departures. So the airport of life. So attending births and then also being with people as they transition out of this life. And to me, there's something very sacred about that. I just absolutely love. There's something so deep and so meaningful about like the joy of being at a birth and getting to welcome new life into the world. And that's what I mean. I've been delivering babies since 1995. So for like that was like that was my very first delivery was in February of 1995 when I was a little baby medical student. And it was a very, very exciting day of my life. The first time I got to catch a baby. And so, I mean, that's almost 30 years ago. Like like less than a year from now, that'll be 30 years since I was had the privilege of getting to um, be there to witness and assist in bringing new life into the world. And it's such a magical, wonderful moment. And I love that I still get to do it. And it's still, every birth is still, it's still just, oh, there's just something absolutely incredible about attending a birth. And so maternity has been a huge part of my practice for the past 25, almost 26 years that I've been in practice. And then the other part that I really like is departures. So I've always really liked being present with people as they transit, being present with the person themselves and their family as they make their transition out of this world. So that involved like doing a lot of like some palliative care at various points in my training, and then in my practice. And then when I worked as a hospitalist for a while, and I did a lot of a lot of palliative care as that. And then at one point I was even working as a maid physician, so I was helping with medical assistance in dying, just right around the time that I left my practice from burnout. And actually it gave me, one of the hardest things in leaving my practice was actually leaving obstetrics behind, which I didn't end up leaving behind, but at the time it looked like that's what I was going to have to do to just try to be able to just reclaim myself, to leave my practice and everything else. I was going to be leaving the most meaningful part of my job. I thought I was going to be leaving that. And then at the time I was also providing medical assistance in dying, and it was this stepping stone that I could hang on to, that I still had meaning in my work. And I feel a bit tearful of that now, because it's the meaning that brings the
Yes.
richness. That's the juice of life. That's the richness of life. That's the part I love, is the meaning, the humanity, and being with people at these, and like the deaths that I was privileged to be part of were just beautiful. And some people will say, like, well, isn't that really hard? Isn't it really sad? And you're like, no, it's beautiful. And to be part of creating that sacred space to honor this person, and to give them a good send off, to be at the airport with them and go, have a great, I because I know that they're heading to a better place. Not that this isn't a bad place, because but there's a lot. Living human life has its challenges. Let's just
Oh,
face it.
yes.
Like, it's rough being here sometimes.
Well, they call it human school for a reason,
Yeah,
right?
human school is right. Like, it's rough being here sometimes. And to be there and to be part of just knowing that they're moving on to the lightness of not carrying the heaviness of, just some of the struggles that we have as humans. And the love of like the families and friends gathered around them. It's just like, it was just this giant love bubble that I got to be part of, helping to co-create, to help create a space for this person to release their human body, and for their soul to soar.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, who gets to have that experience? What a blessing. What a privilege.
Oh, absolute privilege. And
Yeah.
so both the arrivals and the departures have been an incredibly, incredibly rich and beautiful part of my practice. And what I like in general, I tend to gravitate most to the human parts of medicine, like, because I don't like what burnt me out when I left my practice from burnout. It was because it wasn't from, empathy burnout and all these other kinds of things that people talk about. Like, it was like, when people would come to me with a real issue, like something that, like, they're really struggling with something, I was there with them, sitting with them. And that's why I was always running late, because it's hard to do that every 10 minutes. But I was like there and present and with them, and that's the juice. I want to be there in the juiciness of life. And then what killed me was just like all of the paperwork, and like death by a million MRI, and forms and stuff, like the
Yep.
friggin' MRI requisitions, like, and like all of just like disability forms, and the labs and the documents, and it's just like all of this paperwork and all this stuff that to me has zero meaning. It's just paper shuffling. And it's just,
Mm,
and that's the part that I really struggled with. And then to have to do that really fast in a volume-based system, that it's just
mm.
like, every 10 minutes, go, 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 go. And like, how do you land with people as people when you're
Yeah.
trying to see them every 10 minutes? Like,
Yeah.
of course they just become a commodity. Like, it's so stupid, and it grated on my soul. And I
Mhm.
just eventually was just like, screw it, I'm not doing this anymore. And it was sad though, because I loved my patients. I loved my patients. They were so I really cared for them and I wanted to be there for them, but the crap that just kept getting dumped on, like all of the administrative burden of everything was just,
So
oh,
much. Well,
suffocating.
and I think that's what a lot of the people don't understand about, for us medical providers, the administration
Oh,
of medical practice. Oh my gosh,
oh,
it is soul crushing for sure.
yeah.
When I was a fledgling chiropractor, I remember talking to one of the staff doctors in the clinic with such exuberance and enthusiasm. And he said to me, practice is going to do its best to pound that out of you. So, what I want you to do right now, when it's so vibrant for you, so acute, is to really feel into it and try to remember what it feels like in your body. Because
Oh,
25 years from now, you may not feel the same way. And I've
oh,
never forgotten that.
what a wonderful preceptor.
Yeah, he was fantastic in a lot of ways, and he was right. He was absolutely right.
Totally, because
The
the system
business.
does work hard to crush it out of you.
Oh, yes, yes, and running and owning a practice and having the HR and the marketing and being the payroll and, like, all of that stuff. When you talk about the human parts of medicine, fortunately, so many of us go into the healthcare field because we want to help with those human parts.
Totally.
And unfortunately, the process of how it's done goes about taking that away from us. So I'm so grateful that after 26 years, you still have that and that you knew when it was waning. And you've talked about your burnout. And I'd like you to share some more details, but I want to know up front, first of all, how old were you when you went through the burnout? And do you think your perimenopause was part of it?
Oh, very much so. I didn't think so at the time, but, like, looking back, I'm like, "Oh, dear God." It was such a big part of it.
Yep, yep.
Because yeah, so I burnt out at 49.
Mhm.
So I would say I think things started to go bad in the fall of 2017. So I would have just turned 47. So late 40s, right on time, I was getting more and more anxious and things were getting more and more difficult. And then they started ramping up a lot more in 2018 and 2019. I was getting increasingly anxious. Things were getting harder. At the same time, I was working harder and harder, and like my practice was growing and growing. So like the two things were happening simultaneously, that there was the administrative burden was rising, my practice was growing, the time demands on me were increasing, there was more and more and more. And I think my my ovaries were also packing it in more and more by the month.
Yeah.
So I think the two things were happening simultaneously. So like my late 40s was just this gong show of like I was just anxious all the time, and I was doing my and I was working, oh, I don't know, probably 60, 70 hours a week. Like I was doing, one 24-hour call shift a week. I was doing my 2 days in the office were usually about I'd spend at least 12 hours because I would be there at the office. Like by the time I finished seeing patients, it was at least 9 or 10 hours that I was at the office. And then I would do 2 or 3 or 4 hours of charting after I got Maya to bed. And then I was also doing a bit of assisting in the OR, and there was a bunch of other stuff. It was like I was working way too much. But I was on the treadmill, got to keep going, got to keep working, got to keep working, got it was just
Mhm.
crazy. Anyway, so it was getting crazier and crazier throughout 2018 and 2019. And then 2020 came along. Do you remember
God.
anything interesting happened in
Nah,
2020?
nothing. No, nothing. Not a thing. Mm-mm.
Anyway, 2020 was also the year I turned 50. So anyway, so I was so yeah, so like March 2020 came along, and I just things went from bad to worse, and my anxiety just went through the roof. I felt like a human tuning fork, and things
Mhm.
just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And on August 11th, 2020, so this would have been just a month and a half before I turned 50. That's when I hit the wall, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. Like I had nothing left. And so and I made the difficult decision to leave my practice because I didn't know how I was going to make money. I didn't know who was going to look after my patients. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And I couldn't keep going. So I had to make that decision. And thank God I have this very strong spiritual connection. Like I have this strong belief in a higher power and my inner wise woman, she said, jump, I'll catch you. you're okay. I know you're scared, but like, again, I can feel it, right? Like I was
Yeah,
terrified.
I can feel
And
it too.
I was just like, I was so scared. It was a sole income earner for our family. I didn't know how, like I'd already boxed myself into a corner. That's a whole separate story. But I'd already boxed myself in a corner by, being an over functioning woman who had, emasculated my husband so that he was just shy of useless financially. And, like it had actually, like I had created my own mess and I needed to get myself out of it. And fortunately, I have that connection to this sense that I just like my inner wise woman. She said, "It's okay, jump. I'll catch you," and
Oh,
she did. Like, and the series of coincidences that unfolded was absolutely incredible. Like, just like this job came up to assist in the OR that something that my nervous system could handle, and and then one of my colleagues was like, "Well, what if you just," because the day shifts were too much. I couldn't handle like on call, and but because I didn't want to stop doing obstetrics, but the day shifts were too much. They were so busy and so crazy, and I couldn't do them. And one of my colleagues was like, "Well, I need some help with nights. What about just doing a couple nights a month?" And so I was like, "Oh, well." Because the nights are a little bit less crazy. And I thought, okay, well, I can do that. And so I kind of just kept a toe in. And there was just and then I started doing this quality improvement project that like it led me to like there was just all of these series of coincidences that then started kind of unfolding, and it was beautiful. So the universe did catch me, and I was caught by this greater force that has been guiding me ever since then. But to your point of how old I was, yeah, it was just I burnt out just before my 50th birthday, and then I left my practice in April of 2021. So it would have been, like when I was 50, and I've been on this healing journey ever since then. And the cool thing is that so everything was kind of messy for a few years of just like, I don't know what I'm doing, and kind of just floating through and doing a little bit of obstetrics and a little bit of OR assisting and trying various things. But the cool thing is it's all starting to come together again. And that's the thing about transitions is that we have to like there's got to be
breakdown to
those
breakthrough.
there's gotta be the breakdown to break through, and
Yeah.
there's like and there's that chaotic time when then everything is falling apart for the like, basically our world right now, when
Mhm.
everything is falling apart so that the new can rise up. Well, like, even forests, that's how they regenerate themselves, that they actually like, they burn and then the
Yes.
new stuff grows up, and it's
I was
that was
literally
my
going to
life.
make I was just about to make that as an example, so it's a perfect one. Perfect one.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, that but yes, I so to long answer to your short question is yes, I think menopause was a huge factor in this.
As it is for so many of us, and some of us have the ability to leave a job that's no longer serving. Lots of us do not, and some of us have to go even though we do not, which is what you've described.
Yeah.
And I think this, I refer to menopause, the perimenopause transition, perimenopause or the menopause transition as the reckoning. And
Mhm.
it's and some days I'll call it the gauntlet of, and some days it's the crucible of. I think it's all these things.
Yeah.
And we can experience it very differently, one woman to the next. But I think what's really seems to be almost universal for my friends that are professionals, where we have gone into these professions that are traditionally masculine, and the training to get there is very masculinizing,
Mhm.
and we deny our intuition, our instincts,
Yep.
all of those things. And I find it really interesting. I remember being about 10 years out of school and going, why are all my friends showing up with autoimmune disease? And it was about the time that I figured out I could not tolerate gluten. Because
Interesting.
so that's my own version of the autoimmune disease thing. And now we know there's a link between, first of all, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and the data around that's really interesting. But we now know that's also connected to autoimmune disease and disorders
Yeah.
coming up in the body. So I am sure that if you look at your friends over since you went to medical school, there'll be several of them that have had some sort of what I've talked about, some sort of autoimmune disease or
Oh, for
cancer, heaven
sure.
forbid, right?
Well, there's all kinds of things because I think there is because I think the more divorced we are from our essence, the
Mm,
more we get physical manifestations of that, of dis-ease in our body. And that can manifest in a variety of ways, whether it's autoimmune, whether it's cancer, whether it's anxiety and depression, whether it's sleep issues, whether it's like there's a whole list of things. And like for me, the menopausal transit, so as freaking hard as it's been, because like last fall actually is when it got really, really bad. That was like, so it was like several, like 5 or 6 months after my last period that everything just went really sideways. But it's what's been and it like there it was almost like but I kind of liken it to the squeezing the water out of the wings of a butterfly, like that it was just like that it's been this like spiritual transition. And so that it's so for me, this whole journey has been like the journey of a butterfly, actually, where I have butterflies all over my office and stuff. That it's because there was sort of that moment, like I would say August 11th, 2020 was the moment when I was like, it's time to go into my cocoon. Now it took me till April 2021 till I could actually start cocooning, but I was like, okay, I could feel the calling. And then, in April 2021, I went into my cocoon, and then I spent like 2 or 3 years just like be dissolving into caterpillar goo, of just like, dissolving all of what the conditioned parts of me, the masculine conditioned parts of me, the parts that weren't serving me, but that I'd been conditioned to, the pleaser, the perfectionist, the striver, all of those conditioned patterns that I'd been pushed into by society, by medicine, by, all of the different factors. And and then as all of that dissolved, then I could feel this transformation happening within. And then the interesting thing is, but then, just as I was like, okay, I think I'm starting to get it, then it was like the next wave came. And that's when, like, sort of, when I think the dregs of my ovarian reserve was like last fall, and things went sideways. Like my sleep was horrible. Like I was up for hours and hours a night. I felt like the human tuning fork was like, I was just like, I thought, like, I swear you could hear my anxiety. I felt so anxious. Like I was just like, like it was just buzzing all the time. I was so anxious. And I just was like really not coping. And it was really, really hard last fall. But what it made me do is like, so this whole journey, like of burnout, has been a journey of coming home to myself, of learning to just live my life from the inside out rather than the outside in. And so that's been because the conditioned patterns were telling me to live that's when I was living my life from the outside in. So I've been instead trying to actually come home to myself and live my life from the inside out, listening to my intuition, listening to my body, honoring my boundaries, treating myself with self-compassion, like being mindful, noticing my thoughts, like all of those things. And in the process, that it's been helping me come home to myself. And now I've completely lost what I was going to
It's
say
okay. You were talking about
about
the metamorphosis and the butterfly and coming back to yourself. You did it. You talked
yeah.
about it. It was great. What I want to know is how many times what you just talked about have you seen play out in your patients and friends?
Well, I guess I'm seeing it a lot more in my friends because most of my friends are perimenopausal as well. So we're all going through all kinds of transformations. I guess I saw it a lot postpartum as well. Like I would see it with my patients, like sort of that, because I think postpartum is that other time when there's like the veil is thinner. And because one of the things I was trying to say, and I got completely off track, was just how menopause has been like this portal, like how it's been, how it got so difficult that as I made my way through it, though, as I learned to come home to myself, it's actually been it's been like a spiritual transition of helping me move into what I consider more my wise woman years. And I wonder
Mhm,
if that's like what you were talking about, this reckoning,
mhm,
that what I wonder is that reckoning an invitation home to ourselves again?
mhm.
Is that life's way of saying, of calling us into our wise woman years, of calling us up and saying, that the veil gets thinner on purpose, that we can't keep pushing ourselves like, pretending that we're boys any longer, that maybe, right?
Right? Yeah.
Right? Like that we're cyclical beings living in cyclical bodies trying to live in
Yeah.
a linear world. It's not working.
No, and I think biology helps this a great deal in that when we have lost the hormones that give us the biological impetus to pair and be pleasing,
Yes.
when that goes away, otherwise known as no fucks left to give,
Uh-huh.
right? Then you are literally left with a moment of it's you and you and you alone, babe.
Yeah.
So, what's your relationship like to yourself? Do you even understand what moves you spiritually? Do you know what your heart speaks? Do you know what makes you happy? And I know for me that conversation is at the forefront for me right now because the things that I just said to my husband the other day, the things that used to bring me joy, it's just not there anymore, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
So it's an invitation to find a whole new us without the chemical messengers that make us want to pair up and be accommodating, let's
Yes.
just say, right? So again, I think the reckoning is so many elements of health, the physical, the spiritual, the mental health for sure. But I love what you've just said about coming home to ourselves, and that's the invitation. And that's the invitation of the inner wise woman. She is saying she's right there, she's right behind the door, and she's literally saying, you just need to grab the handle and open the door,
Yeah.
and I will guide you. And
Yes.
you know, you talked about the universe, rising up underneath you when you were declaring something totally terrifying. I can't even imagine what that would have felt like. I mean, I can imagine because I've got my own practice,
Yes.
right? So I can imagine what that would have been oh, no, no. In fact, if you'd asked me, I would tell you it would be a bigger mental breakdown for me to walk away from a practice that I loved than it would be to stay. So I guess I haven't touched that burnout deeply enough, right? That's the
Yeah.
thing. Right? But I can see that you would just get to that point, and I've certainly heard other women talk about this, other women physicians talk about this. There's no gas in the tank, like, you literally
Nothing.
cannot get out of bed, like, it's not
Nothing.
even an option. Yep, yeah, that's in that moment. Okay, so how do we come back to ourselves? How do we get there?
Oh, well, it's for me, like it's been that inner wise woman. Like I think really learning to tap into that inner wise woman in a variety of ways. And I've been teaching myself a lot of this. Like so, like I said, so I've actually I created it when I first went through burnout. I actually created. Well, I felt this call. Like it's interesting because way back in 2017, when I first started to feel like everything started to go sideways, there was also this little voice in the back that was like, you need to you're like that I now can give voice to, that it was my inner wise woman saying, you are here to help women come home to themselves. That is one of the reasons you came to this life. And I could feel these little things about like writing a book, blogging, podcasts, courses and stuff, but I didn't know how to do it. And I was so busy working way too much. And so I was just like, and it would and the voice would only be there when I was on vacation, because it was the only time when I was quiet enough that I
The
could hear it.
goddess, seriously.
She was right there. I just drowned her out with the noise most of the time.
Ooh,
And
can I be I'm a little bit controversial and say, isn't that what the patriarchy wants us to do?
yes,
Have
yes, yes, yes,
the
yes,
distraction so
yes.
loud that we
That's
can't
the
hear
whole
her.
point of hustle culture, is to distract us so that we don't actually come home and listen to, because all the wisdom is right here. It's just right here waiting. It's just we're so busy running like hamsters on the wheel. Just go, 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 go. Don't stop,
Yes.
don't stop. And you just get off. And it's like, oh, that's kind of silly. Why are we doing that?
How are we doing that? And I'll tell you, as somebody who is the type A driver personality, the downshift out of my hyperactive phase
Oh,
of my life into this has been rife with is it shame? Is it guilt? Probably guilt for not being a good girl and keeping up the
oh yeah.
culture, right?
Oh, yes. For sure. Oh, like it was interesting because last fall, when everything went really bad, like so I'd already left my practice. I was only working part-time, and I was kind of starting to lean back into some clinical practice. But like when my hormones went completely sideways, like I really had to, in order to be able to sleep a little bit, I needed to make sure I wasn't working I had to like, I was very controlling about my environment. I'm like, I will only work 2 days a week. I will only work this many hours. This is all I will do. Like, I was very controlling because it was the only way I could stay even remotely regulated.
That's just survival, Shayna. That's what that is,
Totally.
right? Because when you've got no gas left in the tank, but you're still drawing breath,
Yeah.
you have to find a way forward.
Yeah.
And your
Yeah.
way forward was just to be very
Oh, and I
controlling
remember what
about
I
it.
was gonna say, and so then in that process, I had to have days where I just wasn't doing much, and those were some of the hardest days. The little bit that I was working, I actually found it easier on the days that I was working because I at least was able to distract myself. But the days that I wasn't distracting myself, it was like all of the things that I'd been ignoring for my entire life were coming forward, and it was just like it was like all of the demons were coming out of the closet going, "Hey, is it time for us to get looked at? Is it time for
Oh,
us to get healed?"
shit.
It was
You,
like it was crazy.
this isn't going to encourage women to do this, right? Has to be clear. And I have
It's
heard
not
this.
for the faint of heart.
The stillness is the hardest part.
The stillness is the hardest part. And well, I guess my message though is that if you are noticing that your mind is going crazy in the stillness, that's okay. That's because we've been so conditioned to stay busy that there's a discomfort like Kate Northrup was talking about this. We will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven.
Yes.
Like that's our conditioned response is that we want the busy, and if we create some space for ourselves, we'll usually fill it with whatever,
Yeah.
phones, social media, work,
Yeah.
family stuff, whatever. Like it's just like the discomfort of actually coming home can be so unsettling that it's easier to be busy. It's easier to just
Mm.
go back to the old pattern.
So, really, what I want to ask here, actually, I want to make a statement first. I had one of my favorite teachers who taught me functional medicine many years ago now said when you are working with the autoimmune population in your practice, one of the first things you need to implement for them or encourage them to implement is at least 1 day a week with no obligation. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. That is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. I can't see myself doing it, but I didn't see the bigger picture. I laugh at it now because I see it, and I do recommend the listeners as of the show will have heard me say, take 25% off your plate and
Yeah.
do not fill the gap.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. I actually think
Do not
that's
fill the
way hard.
gap is the hard part.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yes.
very tempting, and, like, it has been a
Yeah.
practice because I will keep filling it, like, and I keep doing it because well, my psychic says to me, she's like, "Shayna, busyness to you it's like smoking." Like, to not that I smoke, but as if I was a smoker. She's like,
As if you were
it's as
addicted. Yeah.
hard to quit being busy as it is to quit smoking."
Okay. So then this leads into my question for you is knowing how difficult it was to step away from the culture of hustle and to return to yourself, knowing that on the days where you got quiet were the hardest, how would you encourage a woman who's listening to this conversation, perhaps even the hostess, to be brave enough to keep walking?
Oh, I think I can't even describe this beautiful level of contentment that's rising within me now.
Oh,
There's this beautiful sense of calm and ease that I've never had in my entire life. And yes, it's been frickin' hard to all of the stuff that I've gone through. This butterfly metamorphosis and the squeezing of the water out of my wings last fall was really fucking hard. And there's this beautiful sense of calm within me that I've never felt before. I have more
wow.
and more times where I just feel peaceful and content that I'm already okay just as I am. And so, yeah, it is hard and it's so worth it. I would never trade what I feel. I would go through it 100 more times to be able to just to have this feeling that I have now. And it's not there all the time. I still get in my own way and I still,
Sure, sure, sure.
busyness is still a habit I'm slowly letting go of, but I'm letting go of it so much more than I used to. And there's this beauty. It's only just been the past like month or two that it's really, really starting to rise up. And it's like, I just feel peaceful inside. And
Oh
it's so
boy.
lovely,
We were never taught that that was something to aspire to,
you know?
right? And so it's like we are in this education for ourselves. We have to want it and find it for ourselves.
Mhm.
You mentioned Kate Northrup. She tells a story about, she realized that a whole new era of her work was going to open up. Well, not immediately, but she was please listeners, if you do not follow Kate Northrup
Oh,
on
she's great.
Instagram, please follow her. And yes, she is Dr. Northrup, Christiane Northrup's daughter.
Yeah.
Um, but she talks about a number of different things, but please just go follow her. And she talks about how she and her husband were in therapy and there was, some things that were going on and she was just having to be the hyper masculine money provider for the family and because her husband was sick and the therapist said to her, so if somebody wrote you a check for, I don't know, $10 million and you never had to worry about money again for the rest of your life, how would that feel? And she said she recognized in that moment that she would feel terrible.
Mhm.
You've heard her tell this story, right?
No, I haven't, but I can relate to that because when I actually sit and ask myself those questions,
It
it's
doesn't
like,
feel
no,
good. Yeah. Yeah.
it feels better and
Well,
better.
yeah, okay, which is good. Well, that's what she said. She said she realized she was addicted to the stress
Yep,
that the money hustle
yep,
gave her.
yep,
And that's a cortisol problem.
yep,
That's a nervous system regulation problem.
yep,
And she now teaches a whole program on it, which is brilliant. But that was a wake up call for me when I heard her say that.
yep.
Because, and it's interesting, I just interviewed a certified financial planner and I asked her the same question is like, have you seen where women, again, this is the scope of this show, so we're going to talk about women, although men are certainly can absolutely go ahead and have this same problem, is how many of us are pressing the money panic button or the hustle busy panic button because it's an easy way to get a squirt of the cortisol
Mhm.
because our nervous systems have been regulated to drama and trauma and stress, and we get something out of it.
Absolutely, and that was my primary driver for most of my 40s.
Oh, Kate calls it, she said the stress was her fuel. She
Oh,
realized,
absolutely. Oh, 100%.
okay, so let's dig in now. How do we change this? Tell us how you did it. What's your recommendation for the listeners?
Well, I did it by falling apart. I don't know that I recommend
Ooh.
that one. I think it's really consciously taking those moments for ourselves and really even if it's well I can't remember one of like as you know you and I know each other through all the work with Kathy Heller
Yeah.
and she had one of her guests at one time had talked about like the 1 degree shifts and of just like everything it's you want to make the 1 degree shifts and so oftentimes we can actually get under the subconscious like because if we try to make a big shift our subconscious will just call bullshit on it and just go, no, no, we're not going that's too scary. We're not going to do that. And so it's more just like really consciously taking an hour on Saturday morning where I'm just like, I'm going out for a walk. Or I'm gonna, if you can get a full day that you can have an unstructured day where you do nothing like the unicorn days. Like I haven't read the book, but I love the concept of a unicorn day of just really putting some white space in our calendar where it's just like, and the white space isn't to run errands. The white space is to do something that brings us joy. And for a lot of us, like for a long time, I'm like, I don't know what brings me joy. I don't know. I'd become so disconnected from what brings me joy that I'm like, I literally don't know. And I think even just trying things and just seeing what does bring us joy. Eh,
So let me bring some neurochemistry in here for the listeners. This is what you've just talked about is the anhedonia that is in the medical literature that is part of the estrogenic egress is that we can no longer connect to pleasure. We can no longer connect to joy. We are lacking connection to the things that we have identified ourselves with for a long time. Now, it can be a relationship, it can be a job, it can be a hobby, it can be a lot of things. Now, you and I have both personally talked about experiencing this in our perimenopause. And I don't think this gets talked about enough. I think this is directly connected to why women feel an immense amount of mental dissatisfaction, depression, anxiety at this era, because our identity literally gets zipped off us and left in the dust, and we're nude flopping around trying to figure out our way forward. So for me, this is something I'm talking about as much as I can, because for a woman between, I think that the statistic is between 40 and 60, a woman is considerably more likely, 60% more likely to consider suicide
Yep.
during this time.
Yep.
So the more that we are talking and normalizing the fact that we don't feel like ourselves, we are not connecting to the things that we may have put tremendous resources into when when we had the biological impetus to do so,
Yeah.
right? Now it gets to be about us. So I just wanted to pause there when you said that you couldn't connect into pleasure, like you'd fried right through that, you somehow you'd lost that. And previous to the menopause awareness that we've had in the last couple of years, it's actually getting the recognition and time that it's supposed to.
Yeah.
We would have connected that to a sexual dysfunction. And isn't that just crazy, right? Isn't that just crazy? Sure, orgasms are different now than they were, you
Yeah.
know, but listen, you don't have your 25-year-old vagina either. Everything changes. I mean, I'd like to have a day with her again. Can we have a date from time to time, remind me how much I took you for granted. Anyways, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there, Shana, but I think it's a really important thing to talk about that.
Yeah.
I really, really do. We live in a time of unprecedented stress and an awareness that this isn't a healthy way to live. But what can we do to signal calm and safety to our brains so we can feel happy, sleep better, and relieve stress? Long-term health and longevity matter to me, and I use the Apollo to help. Apollo is a therapeutic wearable that works by sending gentle vibrations to the body that signals safety to the brain. It's a non-invasive way to relax, get the sleep you need, focus attention, and get into that creative flow state. With consistent use, the Apollo retrains your nervous system, encourages recovery and calm, and relieves stress to help you feel better overall. It provides continuous support for mental and physical health, and I love it. Since I've been using my Apollo, my sleep is deeper and more restful, my HRV is higher, and I notice my days are spent in a calm and aware state rather than reactive and stressed. Apollo is offering 15% off for listeners of the show. Please visit apolloneuro.com/lovely. That's APOLLONEURO.com/LOVELY, or use the code LOVELY when you check out. Apollo is scientifically validated to show significant benefits. It even has an awesome stay asleep feature. It detects early signs of waking in the night and delivers gentle vibrations to keep you asleep. Check out apolloneuro.com/lovely for 15% off the Apollo wearable technology. So, the inner wise woman is always there. She's quiet.
Yeah.
She's not nearly as loud as the hustle culture,
Mm-mm.
as the casino in our pockets.
Mhm.
She is not nearly as compelling at first as those things because there's a lot of sort of neuro juice. We've got this big highway that I traverse on my way to the office, and I see people looking at their phones when they're on the highway,
Oh, good
driving
lord.
over 100 kilometers an hour.
Oh,
And I think I was having this conversation with a patient who's a traffic police officer, and, how they go about controlling it. He said, "We can't. It's literally everybody. We can't control it."
Oh, that's scary.
It's terrifying. And I said to him, I said, "I see that as, a brain health specialist, as a neuroscientist. I look at that behavior and I understand how hurting we
Yeah.
are."
Yes.
And so all that is an attempt to reach for the casino in our pocket and
Yep.
get a squirt of the juice that makes us feel
I
better.
need some dopamine. I need some
Yep,
adrenaline. I need some
yep,
cortisol.
that's right. That's
I need
right.
a hit.
Whereas previously, when we didn't have smartphones, it would have been cigarettes, or it would have
Yep.
been alcohol or sex or gambling, and those things are still present.
Yeah.
But we don't see the smartphone as a tool of addiction. And
Totally.
yeah, and I think that's a really important thing. Anyways, that was a really big side swipe to
Well, and
menopause.
actually, it actually led me to one of the things that I think has actually been very helpful for me. That one of the things I do is, so I go for a walk most days of the week, and most of the time I don't listen to a podcast or talk to anybody. Or at least half to 2/3 of the time, I actually let my thoughts roam free. I let my thoughts out and just like roam free. And it's so cool, these little hits of inspiration. So it's like when I was on vacation and my inner wise woman, like that's when she talks to me, is when I get quiet. And so when I just so it's creating those spaces where I'm actually quiet enough that I can hear her. And so that's one of the big ones that I do, because I find when I'm moving and I'm out in nature
Mhm.
and I don't have anything to distract me, that's when she's the most likely to talk to me.
So you and I remember life before the internet.
Yes.
And, yep, and, we remember playing outside, and, I mean, we make all the jokes about Generation X being raised on, garden hose and water and the streetlights. We saw the streetlights come on because we were outside playing, right? We have forgotten the art of quiet, and I think about my grandparents about this, because they were wheat farmers.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, the farm is profoundly quiet.
Yeah.
You can't see anything but fields and sky. Now, this is Saskatchewan, so, you can stand on a tin can and watch your dog run away for 3 days,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? So, uh, that's what my grandfather used to say anyways, and
Yeah.
I think it's but again, I think we've lost sort of we've lost the innovation of humanity and the human
Yes.
spirit, because we don't have the quiet time. It's not just intuition we're missing, but as you've just said, you get all of these sort of like sparks that pop up. I know I'm the same way. I could be standing at the sink doing dishes, which we are doing right now in Calgary because we have a water main break and there's water restrictions in the city.
That's
So
what you're saying.
running my dishwasher less. Anyways, and I'm the same way. When I get a chance to be quiet, I
Yeah.
don't put on a podcast.
Yeah.
I may turn on music because it makes me feel good, and
Right.
music is a ministry for me, or
Yeah.
ministers to me. But those little sparks are so lovely when they show up, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think that's been the biggest thing that I've been doing more and more and more is cultivating that space. And so it's the tension between, because at first, like there's all like all the busy thoughts want to come in, and like, oh, I need to, like, because when I first sit down, there's a or if I'm not grounded, or like there's a lot of like, oh, I got to check my phone for this, or oh, I got to respond to this, or oh, like, okay, Shana, just okay, write down the things, and then just. And so I find sometimes if I'm just sitting in like in my living room, sometimes I can sit and be quiet, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I got to do this, oh, I got to do this,
Uh-huh.
oh, I got to do this. So I find the walking helps me because I'm out in nature. I'm moving my body, and there's somehow I've been able to train my mind to actually quiet itself a little bit. And that's when, I mean, sometimes I'm just busy going off and, writing my own craziness again. But other times it's like, oh, okay, cool. And there's this cool, just like flow of like, ooh, like this is soup of possibility that I'm swimming in. And there's just like, ooh, what if I did this? This would be fun. Ooh, I could try this. And that's like, when I like when I've created all my courses and stuff, and actually my new course that I'm kind of brewing the beginnings of a third course. Like that's when it's like, oh, I know I'm gonna like, and it starts to take shape in the quiet, in the infinite possibilities that are created by just that pure potential.
I love it. I love it. a quote is popping to mind right now, and I think it's Joe Dispenza that says that thought is a non-local event. I mean, I'm going down a rabbit hole by saying that now too, but those moments, and I know those moments for myself, but when you give yourself the space,
Yeah.
you can just go down these rabbit holes that are so fun. It's the mental gymnastics in a good way, not the
Yes.
anxious way, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It's like, oh, where are we going now? Oh, the
Yeah,
train's over here. Oh, now it's going over here.
it's
And
over
it's like,
here.
oh,
And you
okay,
you
cool.
you just never know what's gonna show up,
No,
right? You just never know. Okay, you said something about actually, before I ask you this question, I just wanna come back to this. On those days where we're still and the demons are coming up, what's your piece of advice? Get up and move?
I think for each of us, it's probably a little bit different. So I think it's experimenting with what helps best to come home to ourselves again. So for me, and I think sometimes it's a bit different. Like sometimes I need to move. So sometimes, if I do yoga or dance around and that kind of thing, sometimes it's doing some breathing. Sometimes it's um, journaling, talking it out. Sometimes I don't have anyone to talk it out to. So I've started, I leave a voice memo for like my mom, but never actually send it to her or something like that. I just like
Yeah,
talk to my phone. And I can actually sort of, like, as I like kind of spew the stuff out, then I can let it go.
yeah.
Journaling has been a big one for me. I find if I journal a little bit about what's going on, that kind of helps me in the stillness. And there's a
I
variety of things.
Okay, I love all of that, and, great tips. I'm so big on tips on this show. I mean, there is Virgo in my chart, so we gotta make it practical at
Right.
some point, right?
Totally.
And I'm a verbal processor too, so I love that little tip about setting well, God knows you and I verbally process things constantly.
Constantly. I know. I love that.
It's so fun. So, all right, when we have those moments, I think the thing is I'm hearing you talk about the tools. I know for me, I would think there is going to be some women that are gonna feel, like, afraid of those feelings and
Yeah.
will do whatever it takes to not feel them, as we've just talked about,
Yeah.
the smartphone addiction or whatever. And so, is it a matter of I guess what I wanna ask is there is the pursuit of those moments of silence, are they cumulative? Like, do you get to a point where you're like, "They're not so bad anymore?"
Yes.
Tell us more.
Yes. For sure. Because yeah, like I think that's where that sense of inner calm is finally coming from. Because I think it's actually the moments are starting to string together that like I would say over the past year or so, that like as I use the tools of like getting myself back into alignment again, whether it's through breathing, whether it's through movement, whether it's through being in nature, whether it's through talking something out, whether it's through journaling, like using a variety of things that I can feel when I'm in alignment again. Cause I have these moments and I'm like, okay, I feel centered and calm. And I'll have that internal feeling of calm. And it might only last briefly, but it starts, but at least I know it's happened. Like I had it even for a brief moment. So I'm like, okay, then I can do it again. I
Mhm.
felt it for 15 seconds, so I know it's possible to feel it again. And so then, and I think that sort of spurred me on to just go, okay, well, and then keep coming home to myself, keep coming, because it's a daily practice. It's not like we sort of do all these things and we arrive at the, because for a long time I kept thinking I was going to get to this place in the future where I was going to feel finally calm and zen and it was all going to be good. And I was going to, like float away on a pink cloud of unicorn and rainbows or something. But it's just like, but that's not how it works. And more I'm finding that it's the richness of life is in this moment right now. And the more I've been able to just, even for just 10 seconds, be okay with with things exactly as they are, those have become more. And then when I get to that place, then I start, as I'm learning to come home to myself and listen to my body and quiet my mind and follow my intuition. I'm learning to kind of check in with myself first and then making different decisions so that I'm actually creating more spaciousness in my life and decreasing some of the complications so that I'm actually having more and more of those moments because I've actually slowly changed my external reality to be more conducive of an internal calm as well. So that
Mm.
They're both happening. And it's all these little 1 degree shifts. I've been making these little 1 degree shifts for, 3 years now, 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the practice of it.
It's
You're
the it's the
like,
daily practice is just to keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming
right.
back. And they do become or in my experience anyway, they do become cumulative. And if
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, at what point, if a woman is practicing trying to get to her inner wise woman, but she keeps getting caught in the trap of feeling crummy, doing the work is not for the faint of heart. When
oh
you're
yeah.
processing your shit, stuff going to come up. At what point does it make sense for her to reach out to get help, whether a psychologist or a social worker, reach out to her family physician? Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, I would highly recommend we all have at least one person, if not 2 or 3 people to journey with us.
Yes.
Because I've got a coach that I see once a month. I've got my psychics that I see once a month
Yeah.
who I absolutely love. And then I really like Kathy Heller's, like I'm in Kathy
Yep.
Heller's container, and I really like I just keep, like I use, those are the 3 things. And then I have wonderful people like you in my life
Yes.
that we have these back and forth conversations that keep like our conversations remind me to come home to myself, because you help me hold that vibration in myself by, like, we co-create that vibration in the way that we support each other. The 2 of us are constantly lifting each other
Mhm.
up, because we're supporting each other, so that we're not these lone wolves anymore, and we're like, it's okay. And yes,
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have had tons of tough conversations about all the shit that we've been dealing with,
Yes.
and we're there for each other, and just like,
Yes.
I love you, and that sounds so hard, and I'm gonna love you through it. And
Thank you
and then
for
we've been
that.
able to do that for each other, right? And
We
it's been beautiful. And so those, like, we all need a Fiona. Like, we all need a,
we all need
right?
a
Like, we
Shayna,
all
never
we,
mind.
right? Like, we all need somebody that we can just, like, that we can be our real authentic selves with, and just go, you know what? I'm having a really fucking hard time right now.
Yeah.
I am really up against myself. I am really struggling. Can you just, you know, energetically hold me for a few minutes and hold that space, so I can just say that I'm having a hard time? And even just the saying of it, I
Yeah.
find helps me to just
Yeah.
to release it, to just
Yeah.
be witnessed, and to know that I'm
Aw.
not alone is huge.
By the way, every time I get a voice memo from you and you start bawling, I'm bawling, just so you know. I don't know if you know that, but I'm crying
And
right
I do
there
a
with
ball,
you.
as you know, I cry a lot.
It's okay, it's part of it. Listen, it's part of it, right? Gosh, I love what you've said, a team to journey with.
Oh, we all need a team. We are not in this life by ourselves. And the thing is, we as women, like, we are naturally, like, we are meant to live in community. We are meant to be down at the stream doing the washing together, picking berries together, like having the kids all running around, and we're all looking around. Like, we're meant to be in community, and yet we're all siloed. And talk about, like, parenting. That's yeah, a whole separate topic of, like, trying to raise our babies by ourselves. Like, when we're
Yeah.
meant to have all the aunties, right? I mean, the aunties are like I love that about First Nations culture, how they name the women in the community. They're the aunties. I love that. We all need aunties.
Oh
Like,
my God, do
we
we
all need to
ever?
be each other's aunties. And, like, we're meant to do this together. We're not meant to do it alone.
Shayna, are you my auntie?
Yes. And
Am I
you're
your?
mine.
Oh my
Yes.
God, I love that. And I think that's one of those things again that our neurochemistry is it's shifting in perimenopause. We can feel very isolated.
Yes.
We can feel unheard, and sometimes that is mirrored by our medical professionals who are supposed to be helping. But again, there's a knowledge gap between what we're learning in the research and what is in the prescribing world and in the menopausal medicine is rising. Let's put it that way.
I know, it's great.
It's so good, isn't it? It's
Finally.
about time.
Finally. Jeez.
I know. I've been shouting this for 20
Oh,
flipping years. So,
crazy.
anyways, I'll calm myself down. Okay.
Wholesome.
Because God knows I'll go off. All right. You mentioned something, and then I want to ask about your courses. You mentioned something called a unicorn day. I have not heard about this. Can you
Oh,
explain what that is?
there's a book.
Okay.
About it that's, it's something I don't know even the title of the book. It's either Unicorn Day or something about unicorns. Anyway, but it's a concept of having a unicorn day, and I
Okay.
don't know the person that wrote it, so I just know the concept. I haven't actually read the book,
I'm gonna see if I can find it.
but the it's what it is just it's a day. It's like it's what you were talking about, that unstructured day. It's
Yep.
where we put a day into our calendars, and I started out just like I actually did do this even back when I had my practice, that I it was like 1 day a month. That was the best I could do back then. Now I try to do it a little bit more often. But it's a day where we have unstructured time, and even if we just say, like, there's 3 hours on a Saturday or a whatever, or a Thursday evening or whatever, that we just block that out as unicorn time, and it's just unstructured time to just do whatever, and ideally not to be on our phones and to do very but to really just, like, I don't know, paint or sew or talk to a friend or journal or meditate or sit in or just to whatever, like, just playing with ideas of things that might bring us joy, because
Mhm.
we've become so disconnected from the things that actually bring us joy. So just playing with some ideas of what did I used to like when I was
Mhm.
6? Start with
Mhm.
some of those.
I recently was having a moment, a mental moment. Mental health day is what I needed, but I was seeing patients, but I had a gap in care around my lunchtime, and so I was like, you know what? I have a stack of things on my desk that I need to do. Screw it. I'm going to the craft store. So I went down to
Ah,
Michael's
awesome.
and bought some yarn and wandered around the beads and
Mm.
the paints and the it was so good. And when I was in my 20s, my teens and my 20s, I used to love a craft shop. I could have wandered around in there forever. And somehow that's just gone to the wayside. So this conversation has been such a reminder of the goodies that we already have on board. And as you said earlier, we look outside for validation,
Mhm.
but really we should be looking for our own gaze.
Oh, yeah, totally. Get it, like, that this is the place where the only place we can truly feel whole and complete is in here. Nothing outside us will ever make us feel whole or complete. We'll just keep searching. It's just this constant grappling, whereas there in any moment, we can actually just come home to ourselves and feel whole right here, right now, as we are.
Hell yes. We all need that advice. So thank you, Auntie Shana, for delivering the advice. Okay, you mentioned your courses. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, please?
So I've actually created a couple of courses. The first one I created in the spring of 2022. It was originally a group medical visit that I was running, for bringing women together in community to talk about some of these things that we've been talking about today. And there's a little, we talked about mindfulness and boundaries and embodiment, self compassion, intuition, and those kinds of things. And so I created that course and I ran it a few times, and I recorded an online version of it. So there's the self-paced online version that's on my website. It's called Reclaiming Our Power, Reclaiming Ourselves. And it's sort of like meant to be sort of like, so there's, I light a candle, and then I talk about I'll talk about the topic a little bit, and then I give some journaling prompts, and then some invitation to home practice, some resources, and have a little reading and that kind of thing. So each of the videos are about like 20, 25 minutes, and there's a series of 7 of them. So that was my first course, Reclaiming Our Power, Reclaiming Ourselves, which I'm really proud of, it was a really great first effort in terms of, and I've actually had quite a few people do it and say, like, my sister actually did it, and when she was going through burnout, and she was like, Shana, I loved your course. It was so helpful for me in navigating my way through burnout. And because the whole focus of that course is these tools for coming home to ourselves, for accessing that inner wise woman. And then when everything went all crazy last fall, I just started sort of thinking, like, as I was coming out of the worst of that into like in the early part of 2024, I started kind of going, well, what helped me through this? And so I started then creating my next course, which is called Coming Home to Ourselves at Midlife. And so it's just talk about a lot of the different things that I used in navigating my menopause journey. So and I have a little what I did is I took 3 videos from that. And so there's the first video of the first course is available for free on my website as a taster. And then I picked 3 of the 24 videos from coming home to ourselves at midlife are on my website as a it's called a menopause mini series. It's on the homepage, and you can just go check it out as like just to get a sense of what I talk about. And then anyway, they're both on my website if anyone's
What is
interested.
the
So,
website?
oh, my website is drshanajohnston.com. So it's drshanajohnston.com.
Awesome. And it will be linked in the show notes.
Excellent.
So this has been an incredibly important conversation that I think we've had today. I think a lot of women will see themselves in you and in the stories that you shared, and that vulnerability is never lost, I think. So thank you for being that person for me and my community. And I love this title of Auntie Shana. I love it. I love it because when there's a voice memo from you, I'm like, oh goodness, whatever's happening. I say to my husband, I need like 13 minutes and 26 seconds. Bye. I know we've done lectures to each other
I know.
ultimately, right? So good. But it's beginning to be a job. I'm like, okay, a job meaning how can I get paid for this time? Because
Totally.
and it's so fulfilling. It's so fulfilling. Anyway, so thank you for being that person for me.
And likewise, thank you for being that person for me.
I'm so glad we met. I
Me
literally am
too.
blessed.
Me too.
Thank you. Thank
Love
you.
you so much.
I love you too, sister. And I'm so grateful that you have come on the show and given the world. I think this is literally how we talk when we have
Oh
our
yeah,
little voice memo.
totally. One of the reasons I wasn't so I'm like, I should be nervous, but this is first because I've never been on a podcast before. And I'm like, I should probably be nervous, but like, it's just a chat with Fiona. It's fine.
Yeah, you're natural, mommy. You're natural. I was gonna say the only difference for me from this conversation and our daily voice memos or our Zoom calls is that I'm actually dressed up and fancy today. I got the lippies on today. Actually, I have a bra on today. Usually, not so much. Just
yeah. Well, normally I've got my hair all up in a big messy bun and stuff.
There you go.
I actually, had a shower this morning.
A shower? What's that? We're still on water restriction here. No, we are showering in this house, but they are much faster. They are much, much faster. Okay, so I finish the show always by asking my guests a question, and I'm going to ask you the same thing now. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell her to follow my heart. I would say follow your heart, exactly like what I've done for my entire life. But the interesting thing is, I thought back on it, and I was thinking back, like just recently, there was somebody talking about like regrets and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, I don't actually have any regrets. Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I've had challenges. Yes, there's been lots of times I've gone way off the path. And I've learned so much from all my mistakes and all the challenges and everything else that I wouldn't undo any of them. So I would say, and I always have had, there's always been a bit of a sense of that internal compass that and yes, she's gotten a little bit too quiet at times, but it's really been, I would say, keep listening to her. And one thing I will say, she is getting stronger and feistier and louder all the time.
Thank God, right? You
I'm
can't
like,
ignore her
yeah.
then.
Inner wise woman, you go, girl.
She's literally becoming the red hat, ladies. You remember
Oh,
the red hat?
she's totally got, yeah, she's got red and purple everywhere. Oh yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So just recently, I've added on a second question because I'm really curious to know what women need. And so I'm asking this question to you as a woman who's going through her own perimenopause and considering what my needs are and how they're changing. So in Europe, in France, a woman can access pelvic floor physio at any time at no cost to herself. Okay. In the Netherlands, when you give birth, the government provides a night nurse for you for weeks after you've given birth so that you can heal. The woman can heal. Okay. And when I ponder that, and I ponder how we create things in this world, the thing I'm thinking about for myself is, why isn't it that we are offered a leave of menopausal absence in the same way that we get maternity leave or paternity leave for the dudes here in Canada? Um, Now I know some countries, most countries have this. I know the US is behind on this, but let's play imaginary world. Let's play creation for a second. I am personally making a journal entry over what I would like to have offered to me as part of my menopausal leave. So I get a year's leave of absence. My income continues. My government is supporting me and providing resources for me or my institution, whatever. Okay. Again, we're dream boarding here. So there's a number of things that we could bring in to support us during that time. And we don't have to worry about the cost of it. What would you bring in if you got to take a year's leave of absence at your choice? You could take it whenever you want, right? I think what's really important about this is that not every woman will experience childbirth, but every woman who lives long enough will go through menopause. So we should
Yeah.
be considering these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So what would you want to bring in to your menopausal leave that would give you the most support?
I think for me, it's really like I think, that if this was something that was funded and like it would be funding the team for each, like, because we all need a team to get us through this. And so, and that there was lots of flexibility on what that team looked like. Because some people, there might be, maybe the pelvic floor is the biggest problem. So then they actually enlist the help of the pelvic floor physiotherapist. For some people like me who are just like unbelievable anxiety, that it's more sort of mental health support, whether it's a counselor or a coach or, and like I said, my psychic, like I just, like
Yeah,
let's rig it nice and wide open that it's like whoever, but that we are able to access the supports that we need to help us through this, that no matter which part of that we're having the biggest challenge, that we can actually have a funded ability to have those supports for us, and that we have the financial support that if we're really not feeling like we can work the way that we need we need a breather that we need to catch our breath, that there's some funding
mhm,
to allow us to do that. And maybe it's like, because I mean, really, this has been a multi-year process. I mean, the worst of it was like there was a 6-month kind of period when it was the worst. And I would have loved to be able to have some kind of medical leave for that. But even that you could then, like, because if you had a more drawn out experience, you could do partial for 2 years or even more partial for like that you could say that there was this amount of support and you could be draw it out over a bigger period of time, but
yeah,
that there was the support that you needed financially and other resources so that you could actually, so that we could make, so that we, to help us navigate this because it is a rough transition.
it is. It
And
is.
and and also, and to have those, some of those supports reminding us that it's not because we're broken.
Mm,
It's actually because we're moving through a portal. We're moving through a spiritual transition into our wise woman years. And so,
mm,
yes, it's hard. We're squeezing the water out of our
yeah.
wings
Mhm.
and we're becoming something even more incredible.
Oh, yes. And to be supported in doing
Yeah.
that.
To be
So
supported in doing that.
I invite you, as I have invited my other guest experts that have come on and have answered that question, please start talking about the menopausal leave of absence.
Yes.
Let's create that in this universe. Let's
Yes.
start putting the energy and the vibration into the field because I believe we can do it. Women in our generation, we're making shit happen like it's not happened before, right?
Yes, totally.
And it may be that we're too old, too long past
Yep.
menopause to take it. But if we're the ones that created it so the
Exactly.
others can do better, then I think we've done our work well.
Totally. Yeah. Well, because change can happen. Because I mean, when I first graduated, there was no medical leave for us as physicians. Like, because we're self-employed, so we don't actually qualify for EI or anything like. So there was no maternity leave. You had to fund it all yourself. And I was at the very beginning of this little pilot program where we got basically the equivalent of EI. We got like $400 a week for 17 weeks, and that was like revolutionary for us to
Yeah.
have that. And now that's grown into that there's it's a larger amount. I don't know what it is now, but it's a larger amount, and both men and women qualify
Can
for
take
getting
it.
it, like through the Doctors of BC. So you're right. It's all got to start somewhere. And yes, we might not be the ones that get, well, we're unlikely to be the ones that are going to get to benefit from it. And we get to benefit from the vote for what the suffragettes and the women, but like for, you know what I mean? There's all of these other women who have done all these incredible things
Yep.
that we get to benefit from. So this is our way of paying it forward. I love that
Yes.
idea.
Yes. Talk to the people in charge, will you?
Yes. Sounds good.
Not just the goddess. Dr. Shana Johnston, thank you for joining me today. I'm so grateful to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
The information and other content provided in this show, or in any linked materials, is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise or treatment. We are doctors, but we aren't your doctor. Seek your doctor's opinion. If you or any other person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical treatment. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have heard in this podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The opinions and views expressed on this page and in this show have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution. Thank you.